Welcome, everybody. I've got a nationally syndicated cartoonist here, Drew Sheneman. You want to give us just a brief little elevator pitch about who you are and about your career?
My name's Drew Sheneman. I've been an editorial cartoonist since I graduated college back in 1998. I'm syndicated nationally. I do my own Substack here. I also draw and illustrate children's books and commercial art stuff like that.
Yeah. Now I saw that you were syndicated at like age 23. That's you were
Yeah,
like the youngest nationally syndicated cartoonist. That's a pretty good praise.
yeah. I got hired before I graduated college. I went to Central Michigan University, but I grew up here in New Jersey, uh, and I ended up getting hired at the Star Ledger, which is formerly New Jersey's largest newspaper. Um, I think it was 23, and started syndication shortly thereafter. Just because once you have a staff job, you're going to get syndicated. It's not like it's that hard.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not every artist that gets a job right out of college.
No, it was yeah,
Especially now, like a lot of artists, they can't get work even, outside of college. And hopefully
yeah,
people don't go too far into debt for, like I have an acting degree, for instance, pretty
right.
useless for a lot of
Yeah,
things. Thankfully, I didn't have debt.
I got my art degree just because it was either that or political science, and political science books are really big. Uh,
Mm.
and art is like the one major where you can like sleep through a final and still do okay, which I did.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I know. As an acting major, I did not have a very difficult college experience, to say the least.
no,
Yeah.
no. The most difficult experience I ever had, like one of my art classes, was like because I drew cartoons for the paper as well. It's like one of my professors disagreed with something I said, but they'd give me a hard time. But
That's kind of cool. I actually worked for the school newspaper in college as well as like my work and learn program. Where
mhm,
like, as an acting degree, it started off doing like workshop stuff, like building sets and things in the theater department. I was like, I hate this. Like, I had to clean up sawdust and do woodwork. So I found I had a friend that was on the student newspaper, and he was just like, dude, it's so easy. You write one article a week, you get 10 hours worth of the pay for the work study program. And then I ended up being an editor, and I was just doing like opinion articles. So it's like real easy for me to write like
yeah,
45.
I didn't even have to go into the office. I would just I would draw my cartoon. I started off like I wanted like knowing that I wanted to work for the newspaper. So I was there for like a week. I went in and showed like, this is my portfolio. Do you guys, because they ran editorial cartoons and they had like one guy who did like one a week, and it was like the paper published every other day.
Uh-huh.
So I started out like doing one a week for $5. Yeah, they pay you $5.
That
Okay.
was, yeah.
And then like a couple of weeks in there, I said like, well, you can do like the two spots. And that was all right, great, $10 a week. And then the guy who was doing the run, who was there before me, called and gave me his spot. And then from then on, for the next 4 years, I didn't miss like a paper. I eventually made more than $5, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Were you always an art kid growing up? Like, were you drawing all the time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I started, but my whole thing started with comics. I've been collecting comic books since I'm not actively collecting anymore, but I started collecting comics when I was like 8 years old. I always loved comic books. The 20 boxes in my garage will, are evidence of that. Um, and from there it went into stuff like Mad Magazine, and then you buy like the comic strip collections at the bookstore, and just I've always been I came to political cartooning through the cartoon part, and the politics came a little bit later as I got older and started to keep abreast of what was happening and wanted to read and became politically active.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what kind of made you more politically active? You started in like 98, you said. So, was it, yeah, Bill Clinton?
Well, I started before that in college, so that maybe I started. I went into college knowing that I wanted to draw political cartoons because I'd always been a guy who kept up with current events and had an opinion about stuff. Even in high school, when most kids don't give a crap. Um, so it was. I thought, well, what am I going to do? I love to draw. Do I go into animation? Do I do comic strips? and political cartooning just sort of fit. I like that it's a new topic and subject every day.
Yeah.
You're not having to redraw. I mean, essentially, you go over the same topics over time, but you're not having to redraw the same thing over and over and over again, the same characters.
Yeah.
You get a cast of characters, but they change. They rotate in and out. Um, and I liked the fact that it was like really big on the page. You had these little thumbnail size comic strips, but you got a big editorial cartoon. And it just sort of, I drifted into that. And then, I started in college and kept going through I graduated, and during my senior year, I was sort of interviewing for jobs for, positions. And, I ended up getting one here in New Jersey where I grew up. I was living in Michigan at the time, but, came back here to New Jersey, and, I've been at the Star Ledger, I was at the Star Ledger until 2010 on staff, and I still draw, one a week for them on Sundays with a column and a cartoon and stuff.
Yeah. So the things that you post on Substack, and that's how I kind of found you. You're doing a little like editorial writing too with your cartoons, and just looking at your cartoons. It's like, well, clearly we probably agree a lot on politics. But when you were getting started though, growing up, what kind of cartoons was it? Like the funnies in the paper, graphic novels? What kind of really got you interested in the art form?
Initially, it was like superhero comics, like Justice League type stuff, X-Men, things like that. That segued into sort of the gag stuff, like Mad Magazine was a big deal. Graphic novels, like the whole term graphic novels, they were just comics then. Graphic novels sort of happened later, but I was into all that stuff. Anything, I was into a whole bunch of different anime, like Looney Tunes, and the humor stuff was, started with Mad and then segued into like the Sunday Funnies. I used to, my grandparents, lived down in Philadelphia. They used to like save their comic section for me.
Nice, yeah.
So I was like, yeah. So,
that, like, I grew up watching or reading a lot of Calvin and Hobbes and The Far Side. Yeah. Like, those were very formative for me growing up.
Calvin and Hobbes was a big one. Far Side was a big one. Bloom County was a big one. Doonesbury a little later. Also, and then sort of as you get older and you sort of branch out and you sort of look for like the weirder stuff. Like the alternative comics. You'll go down like a Robert Crumb rabbit hole, or something like that. So I always like to explore like what different films or what different artists, because for me that's what it's about. I'm not about like an individual artist or a writer. I'll follow them around and see what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not like a character. Like when it comes to like reading comics, I don't like follow a certain character over and over again.
Okay.
Who's drawing or writing the book? Do they have something interesting to do with it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm drawn to.
What do you, as you're putting your cartoons together and formulating your ideas, what comes first? Is it the picture? Is it like, are you doom scrolling the internet and being like, I need to make fun of like J.D. Vance today because he did something douchey in the news or something like that? Like, what's your process?
It's my process is generally I take, I used to work, now I work, digitally on my iPad. But the process is the same. I have a blank file, and I just start writing down topics, and then underneath the topics will be like one or two bullet points that I might want to come back to, and that takes that's after I've done all the reading. I've done articles and scrolled and done all that stuff. So then I'm usually left with like 5 or 6 different topics, each with a couple bullet points, and maybe that like it can just be like a random word brainstorm, whatever. And then I'll go back over and decide, well, what are people talking about today? What seems to be getting some traction out there? That's not always a decider, but sometimes it is. And then I'll just stare at a blank page. I mean, that's the best motivator.
Yeah.
And then I just write down, and then my notes they're indecipherable to you. It's scribbles, a couple of notes, maybe a word here or there, and eventually I come out with something that resembles a cartoon idea.
Yeah. Do you use a lot of notebooks? Like, do you just have notebooks filled of sketches and ideas and things like that? Or are you mostly digital now, where you just kind of start one thing and finish it rather than do like a whole bunch of sketches?
Well, both. I always keep a sketchbook. I've always got, pens and art supplies and crap lying around. Um, but 90% of my stuff happens. I just do digital. I used to have like just reams of copier paper, just disposable. I'm not precious about these things at all. They have a very short shelf life, so I do them, throw out all the extra garbage, and what's next. But now I'll just have it's just all digital. I've got I work in a file in a program called Procreate.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's easy to just jot stuff down. I work on the Apple iPad Pro with a little stylus.
Nice.
I've been doing that for like a decade now, so it's second nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
No,
I was gonna ask you, like with your process of drawing, like the political cartoons being just like one, I guess I'm blanking on the term, but like one panel or whatever, one
yeah, single
picture.
panel.
Yeah, and like reading the Far Side, we had like some 10th anniversary edition, some special edition where Gary Larson was like talking about like the limitations because the Far Side was, I think, almost always just like one panel. So he was talking about how like the limitations kind of made him more creative in terms of like drawing with perspective and like everything that you can cram into just one panel but still being explanatory. And obviously, political cartoons will typically have, it's like what you see is kind of like 10%. It's like an iceberg where most of the stuff and like the intent and the subject matter is like beneath the surface. So like, in terms of like political cartoons, like the things you label to give the reader a clue about what it's like referencing and talking about, like how does that impact your process? Like just the kind of single panel idea and cramming in like like an articulate political idea or reaction to the current news in just one photo. Any commentary on any of that?
Yeah, the first thing I have to do, or the first thing I consider when I'm drawing something is I consider the audience. You're either coming to this thing, you're on an editorial page, you're on a website that offers opinion, you're on my Substack, or someplace where you have a base knowledge of current events, of what's happening. So sometimes the tendency can be to over explain to the audience.
Yeah.
That just bogs everything down. It's too wordy. Brevity is the soul of wit. Keep it short, keep it simple.
For sure.
So I consider the audience first. The fact that they've encountered this cartoon means that they've got a baseline of political knowledge. They're probably, not always, but somewhat aligned in terms of how what I'm thinking in terms of ideology, and then you go from there to the limitation. I mean, every great creative endeavor always had some sort of limitations. If you have no limitations,
yeah, I think creativity often comes from dealing with the limitations or the framework that you're working in to make it work. If it's too open-ended, it's almost you like kind of can't be creative, and then you become more creative playing with the format or the medium itself a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not reinventing anything. This is an established format. It's a single panel cartoon. They've been around since Ben Franklin, Jonah die. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to, I gotta say, in an amusing fashion, if I can innovate or find a new idea or an angle somebody hasn't done before, great. If I have an angle somebody has used before, what can I offer that's new? How can I, take a trope that's been used a billion times in every cartoon, so then it's like burned itself into your head that this is sort of a visual language, and how can I play on that? And part of that is when you're sitting and brainstorming and jotting down ideas, you'll get a lot of obvious ones real quick.
Right.
Part of my practice is to throw out the first one or two ideas, because there's only one way. Back when it was like a breaking news type, or like when you were trying to be super original, there was only two ways to do it. Think of something super original and creative, or be first with the idea that everybody else is going to do. Because there's a parallel thought type of thing that happens.
Yeah.
When you see a certain story, without doubt that a half dozen other guys are going to do some variation on a theme. So you can either be different than that or you can be first. I always thought it was more fun to be different. That's not saying I haven't done stuff other guys have done before, because there's no way to avoid that.
Yeah, right. Of course. I think about that a lot with the halfway post, like the satirical headlines that I write. There are always a million ideas that like kind of everybody's doing, but it's like, how can I get a new spin or new angle on it?
Yeah, what can I offer that's different from what's been done before? If I can't, then just let somebody else do it, and I'll pick a different topic. If I can't offer anything different on the Ukrainian peace talks or something unique to my perspective, then I'll let somebody else do it.
Right.
And I'll move on to a different topic. I can pick something else. There's no shortage of news.
Yeah, I think a few days ago, you posted a funny picture of, I think it was Lincoln and FDR, and then you added Trump's quiet piggy line to like famous historical quotes from our past presidents. And
yeah, that's what I do a lot, is just sort of,
yeah.
Sometimes you don't need to overflow. Sometimes you just need to like lay out. The contrasts will present themselves. Like,
Right.
you show like inspirational quote from Lincoln, a presidential quote from FDR, and then you draw Trump in a wallowing in his own crapulence.
Yeah.
Just use their own words against them, and you don't have to explain it a whole lot. People,
Right.
It's
pretty
they don't understand what you're trying to say.
Do you think the fact that Donald Trump is such a cartoon character himself helps you or hinders like your comedy and cartoons? Like, is it hard to people ask me this all the time, like, how do you keep up when things are already so absurd? Does it help that Trump is so cartoonish and that there's so many like personality flaws that you can like highlight and use to, make some of the political points that you're making? Or is it hard to like stay ahead of Trump and like still exaggerate and be a little more absurd than the like real life absurdity?
That was like when he first entered the back in 26, earlier in 2016, but when he first sort of came down the escalator and entered our lives as a political figure. I live in New Jersey. I'm about a mile and a half from Trump National golf course. Trump has been part of my life here in New Jersey since growing up. He was always just sort of a punchline. Now he's a problem.
Yeah.
But when he first sort of entered our lives in that fashion, in that context, people who do stuff like pundits and commentators were like, well, what do we do with this guy? He's already a caricature of himself. And I think you sort of go the opposite way, and instead of focusing on all the craziness, sure, I still draw him with like the weird orange face and the goofy hair and stuff. but I'm not doing, it's not substantive. It's just a caricature. I really stick to the meat and potatoes of, what makes this guy so dangerous.
Right.
And along the way, you're pointing out also how ridiculous of a human being he is, because, you can't help it. But it's like when you're drawing take it back to cartooning, when you're drawing a caricature, if you include and exaggerate every feature of somebody's face, you end up with like just some grotesque gargoyle looking thing. You have to pick and choose.
Yeah, right.
What you're going to focus on, what you're going to exaggerate. So for me, it's always come back to the substance of what he's doing. Try and filter out some of the noise of what he's saying, because he's got this whole flood the zone thing where just constant barrage of nonsense.
Yeah.
To distract purposefully, and to just deal with him on the merits and satirize that, because that's what really matters. It's not what he cares about is the image and the fluff and the pyrotechnics of it all. I want people to understand what's happening, what the substantive, the consequence of putting this man in office again.
Right. Now you're from New Jersey. Any thoughts on the New Jersey elections very recently? It was looking like New Jersey, they were maybe thinking it would be a little more purple. It kind of has trended a little more purple in recent elections, but it was a pretty solidly blue wave election in New Jersey, it seemed.
Yeah, I was not convinced of the whole we're going. New Jersey has a pattern of every once in a while will elect a Republican governor. We've had Christie Whitman, Chris Christie for 8 years. Um, most the legislature is overwhelmingly Democrat. Um, the state is run by a cabal of legislative Democrats, and Jack Ciattarelli has run. He's the guy who ran against Mikey Sherrill and got trounced for the third time. He didn't. Everybody's making a big deal because he came so close last time. It was 3 percentage points. He got beat by Philip Murphy, but nationally, 3 percentage points is huge. Here in New Jersey, it's not so huge. So he didn't come quite as close as everybody said he did. But no, in Jersey, Trump is not we've dealt with him for 30 years. He's not popular here. Everybody knows what he is and who he is, and they're on to him. So the backlash against him was because, these were solid red districts that flipped that I didn't think were going to flip. I thought, no way. And they did. And so yeah, in New Jersey, you can tell that there was most definitely this time a pronounced blue wave. But when it was all with, excuse me, digital and social media now, and the polling is just so askew from reality now. The polling going into the race was like, Ciattarelli was close. It was closing it's down to single digits. He's in 4 points. You got beat by almost 14. So it was never. I personally never thought it was going to be that close.
Right.
But we're going to have something to write about.
Yeah, I think polling is it's like weird snapshots, and I think in the digital age we just quite haven't figured out quite how to actually get like a good sample size. Because obviously a lot of polling is like telephone calls and things. Like you can't really just do an internet poll because then anyone can jump in. But then now with like telephone calls and like even like getting people at the mall or whatever like they used to do, it's like you're not really getting like a substantial like sample size chunk of the population with these things because like people picking up random phone calls like that skews heavily on the
that's what
like higher age demographic.
Yeah, that's what I've said for a long time. It should be when you're parsing poll results, they always say our poll of 1,900 likely voters. It should be 1,900 likely voters willing to pick up a random phone call.
Yeah,
that's
right.
who you.
Yeah, for real.
I haven't answered myself in a decade.
Yeah. Let's see. With the kind of cartoonization of Donald Trump, I have this idea. Like, do you think Trump will have like a lasting cultural impact in media and especially comedy? Just because like it's so ripe. There's so much comedy about him. Like, for instance, I just recently watched The Death of Stalin. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's
one of my favorites.
Oh, really? Yeah. It was
absolutely.
But I feel like there's definitely, in the future, there's definitely some like films or series even just like mocking all of the people. And even the people Trump appoints to his cabinet are really weird and incompetent and kind of cartoon characters in their own way. So it's just, to me, it seems like going forward in the future, it'll be very ripe. And I do have a dream someday to turn like a lot of the comedy I've been writing over the last 8 years into something like this. Maybe I could come up with like a script or something just about the insane Trump White House and just make a cartoon of all of them. And even, like Quentin Tarantino's famous for Inglourious Basterds with the kind of revisionist historical ending where Hitler or like all those Nazis just get obliterated in that theater or whatever. How do you think Trump's like lasting comedy star power will be?
I do think something like that could work. Something you're thinking like, once we're sort of clear of, once we've moved past this sort of episode, in retrospect, I think it'll be a lot more funny. It'll be a lot funnier when you're looking back on it than if like you're still waiting in the middle of it. But no, like I think he's going to have. I think he's already had a lasting cultural impact. The sort of they use social media and stuff like that as like this accelerant to like it's just warp speeded the return of shamelessness. people don't give a shit. Like Trump doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Say what you want about me, but say stuff. He'll whine about like I don't like this picture of me or that picture of me, but he doesn't. He likes that the pictures are out there. So in terms of his lasting impact, I think that on at least on like comedy and stuff like that is now we have to work so much harder to. Comedy's always about exaggeration or pushing this or pulling that, and he makes it so difficult because there's nothing he won't do or say.
Right.
There's no shameless act he won't commit or admit to.
For real, yeah.
So it's it's the truth is stranger than fiction thing. What am I supposed to do with this? And you guess you just sort of you do what you're doing, you do what I'm doing.
Right.
You play you sort of deal with you sort of ride the wave of the news cycle, and you make fun of what's happening, and you poke fun at him, and you mentioned like all the people around him, like the dolts and the buffoonery. I think it's a lot more dangerous this time around. His first term, he was just surrounded by an absolute like just carnies, just in the interim, during Biden, some of the real operators on the far right and your Russ Voughts and stuff, guys like that, figured out that he would be a wonderful. I always say that Trump doesn't have an ideology; he has an operating system. You can plug. He's an empty vessel. You can plug or pour all your awful ideas into as a way to sort of realize them, because he doesn't care as long as he gets to be in charge.
Yeah. And it's right. For everyone else with an ulterior agenda. Trump is the perfect vessel because he's really more of a mascot rather than like a party. Right. He's definitely not a party leader. He's got no conservative like bone in his body. Really, there's nothing except for like self-aggrandizement that he's really interested in. So like especially this time around, like the people he picked without like the kind of stalwart like career Republican bureaucrats that he had the first time around. Now you have just essentially like media personalities, and you look at like Kristi Noem, Cash Patel, like they're treating their jobs really like they're still podcast bros. And, Cash Patel is like the perfect example of him like feuding with people online, like doing all these insane things and like just not taking the job serious to the degree that like, obviously his position demands with like responsibility and everything.
And those people, your Patels, your Noams, your guys like that, your players like that, as infuriating as they are, as damaging as they can be to institutions and stuff in the short term, I don't think they're the really dangerous ones. It's the guys in the background, your Stephen Millers, your Russ Voughts, you guys who are really chipping away at the underpinnings of our democracy. It's at every point, people, progressives have like run the alarm about these people, and everybody tells it. It started off with like people tell you, "Oh, you're overreacting." They're just, they're not that dangerous. They are that dangerous. They've been that dangerous. We've been underreacting, and it's the real, the Project 2025 goons who have all this stuff planned out and thought about it in a real deep and meaningful way on how to.
And wrote out a blueprint.
Right, and wrote out a blueprint without ever thinking that's a bad idea. And guess what? It turned out not to be, because they got into power anyway. It's not going great for them because these ideas are terrible, but.
And elected unpopular.
Doing stuff like writing down what we're going to do a bunch of unpopular stuff. So they still got elected. Now they're doing all that unpopular stuff, and people don't like it. So, I think the plan was to chip away and sort of entrench themselves deeply enough that, where they can gerrymander and stuff like that, and sort of hang on to power by any means necessary, and just hope for, that you'll carry them through until they can achieve what they want.
Are you heartened that Republicans in Congress have just been so ineffective, like even shutting down the government for 2 months? Like everything Trump is doing with Project 2025 is largely just executive orders. It's like just basically executive branch kind of operationing and policy making, whereas like most of that can be undone just as easily by the next Democratic president, hopefully, barring any more coup attempts or something like that. But like, Congress is not passing laws. Like the ways to make things permanent is Congress passing laws, but this Congress is just so it's kind of a do nothing Congress. So
It's been for a
you
while.
hope a little bit.
I think it's less damaging in the long term because if you look at this with an eye for history, we've gone through horrible. We've dealt with horrible leadership before. This is not Trump is an aberration for us because we've had such a long sort of peacetime expansionary uh, period in the United States. But we're still a relatively young country. We've had plenty of dummies who've been the president and who've done damage in the short term. The Obama Corp is that progress is not always a straight line. We can and will overcome Trump and all this Trumpism. I think people thought we were a lot further away from it than we were. And our ability to fall back into sort of this revisionist or sort of political climate was a little surprising to people who thought we gotten past it. But as we go on, as Trump fades away, hopefully, we will get back to a more normal sort of balance that as normal as you can get with like a two-party system, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. How are you liking Substack overall? Do you think Substack is something you're going to keep going? Is it something that you're going to move beyond? Like you've been writing a lot of editorials you, I guess, can't obviously do with like the newspaper cartoons that get syndicated, right? It's not all the commentary. So are you liking that kind of freedom of Substack? Like how do you imagine yourself growing on this platform?
Yeah, I've only been doing it for, I think I started like this past summer. Just because I wanted to get off of, I used to just post my stuff on like Instagram and stuff like that. And I don't like making content for billionaires. I don't like being subject to, the vagaries of an algorithm. I'd rather get off there and I'd rather have some control over the audience or build an audience like you have and like I'm doing slowly here. As time goes by, I will probably do more stuff that's not just strictly political cartoons, but that's what everybody's there for right now. So that's sort of been my focus. I like the advantage of it is that I do the cartoons, and I've been blogging and stuff like that for years and years for NJ.com and for the newspaper and stuff like that. But there's more freedom here. I can sort of write. I don't have to like stick to a certain word count or subject or topic or
right.
For a long time, it was hard for me because I'd pick a given topic and then I would draw the cartoon, and the cartoon was what I wanted to say about the topic. I'm like, what?
Right.
What else do I say? And I sort of would write these plotting blog posts that would just sort of go over what the cartoon was about. Now I'm trying to sort of branch out and write a little bit more expansively, but not too much. I mean, too much of me is, who needs, like, you don't need 1,000 words in a cartoon for me 4 times a week. That's too much.
Right.
I figure like 3, 4, or 5 paragraphs, a couple of snarky jokes, and a cartoon. If you're a subscriber, then I think you're getting your money's worth. If you're free, if you're a free subscriber, you're definitely getting your money's worth.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I feel that. I give out so many jokes for free every day and every week. I feel like it's nice, like economizing it. Like it's an interesting pay system on Substack, which is kind of nice. Instead of having to do like advertisements on a website or something like that, and just getting like sheer, thousands like clicks per viewer or whatever the metrics are on websites, which maybe don't really work that well, but it is interesting. It's definitely something that you have to like build your own audience on Substack, but it does give you the freedom to do whatever you want. I think on a lot of other like platforms, maybe more than Substack, you get that kind of audience capture where you kind of
Mhm.
can't change what you're doing. Like, TikTok, especially, there's been some people that try to change what they're doing with their TikTok videos and then they lose their entire audience because, like, there was that famous instance of some guy that he was just doing videos of himself at work having like a normal 9 to 5 job. And then he
Mhm.
made enough money from TikTok to quit that and totally change his like platform and all the videos that he was posting. And then he lost all his money and all of his followers, which is just kind of like a funny case study in a digital media.
Yeah, if I you know if I want to expand like my offerings, I'm not going to leave. You'll get stuff in addition to what I'm doing. You're not going to get stuff instead of what I'm doing. Like, uh, I understand that the what you said about the TikTok on like Instagram. I still use and sometimes scroll through the reels and stuff. I find great. There's an account I follow that just is some person like getting their free lunch at work every day, and I just think like, for
Yep.
some reason
Nice.
now if they switched and started off doing political commentary as they're like sitting there getting their miso soup, I might think about unsubscribing.
Yeah.
So
If they go hardcore into like alt right and Nazi stuff.
we start talking about vaccines and like how
Yeah.
fluoride is a mind control agent and
Yeah. How would you say the newspaper world is? Is it a kind of small world of
terrible.
political cartoonists? And like, do you go to any conventions or events or something? Do you have a lot of cartoonist friends and
I
acquaintances?
do have a lot of cartoonist friends. A lot of them are on here on Substack now. You guys like Jack Oman and Clay Jones and Steve Sack. And I used to go to conventions when I was like my first sort of entering into the world of political cartooning was I won uh, a college competition called the John Loker Award from the Association of American Editorial Cartoonists when I was 19 for my college stuff. And the prize is that they fly you out, expenses paid, to wherever their convention was that year. It happened to be in Baltimore. I was in Michigan at the time.
Nice.
So that was when I met those guys. I was a 19-year-old kid. I had no idea what I was doing, scared out of my mind. I'd never traveled alone. Just walking around Baltimore, uh, looking for a place to make copies of my cartoons so I could show them to
Yeah.
people. So yeah, those I don't really go anymore because it's not. I mean, I'm not telling any tales out of school, but I mean the newspaper business is terrible. Um, there's very few cartooning staff jobs anymore. I don't have one. I haven't had a staff job since 2010. I'm sort of an independent contractor. Um, I do this. I do all sorts of different stuff. But I do still think that it's important. I like the work. It happens to be something I'm okay at, so I keep pursuing it. That's why I like stuff like Substack, where it's sort of this unique place where you can build an audience that has more endurance and you have more control over, and it's not you're not subject to an algorithm that if they decide to tweak a 1 or a 0, your stuff doesn't get surfaced anymore. I left Facebook
Right.
a decade ago just because it was such. I could see you just scrolling through it, just like, what the hell am I doing here? It's just designed to make you a zombie. So yeah, I just got off of that. Now there's different, more interactive forums like your Reddits and Substack where you have a direct line to your audience where I do the thing shows up in their inbox. Now I'm not all that familiar with how to work the app or which is now like because Substack's now a platform too.
Right.
So I mean, I'd sort of use the app part of it as like a promotional thing. I do stuff I'm doing here with you. Feel free to subscribe. Love to have you, free or otherwise, to promote. And I'm using like I still put stuff on Instagram every once in a while just to remind people that I'm here. Come over here where you get like my stupid jokes and the commentary and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of a value add.
Do you think newspapers are still kind of fading out? Do you think they'll hit some kind of like niche point of like they'll maybe not like a bottom, but like almost like vinyl records where there'll always be a certain segment of people that want print newspapers, print magazines?
I do think we're reaching a point where they've contracted so much that the newspapers and stuff that have survived are the ones that evolved. They're not just newspapers. They're now news gathering organizations. They have a web they have a web presence, a big one like NJ.com is one of the largest websites in terms of traffic in the country. Or they branded themselves differently. The Times, the Post is which is going through it a little bit right now because of ownership and all that stuff. But the ones that have sort of like a trusted brand and are able to still deliver on what's promised. People have a lot of problem with the Times in terms of their opinion section and all that stuff, but it's still a bunch of really talented reporters and editors putting out high quality journalism, which is not something you can get everywhere. So it still has value. And those are the institutions that will sort of endure. Um,
Right.
I think if you're like a mid-sized paper in like a mid-sized market, I think you're probably still going to go through it a bit. Your smaller, more individual, locals or dailies, the weeklies, or that's a different. I'm certainly not that qualified to talk on their economics, but it's still I think going to be a rough deal. But
Yeah.
I think you've got, like I said, the ones that are still around and will stay around have evolved and will continue to, because trying to compete in a digital marketplace as a media organization is always trying to hit a moving target.
Yeah, right. I think about that a lot in terms of especially things like CNN and
Right.
MSNBC, because you get a lot of independent media people now that are like, oh, the legacy media, the mainstream media, they don't know anything. They're all trash. But at the end of the day, when a volcano is erupting somewhere in the world, it's not like Ben Shapiro sending out a team to go get the breaking news. If there's a coup in a Asian country or something, it's not some random substacker that is there on the ground. Everyone's still all these commentators still, even the ones that shit on CNN and all the media companies come constantly, they still depend on all of that commentary, all of that news, all of those reporters, all of that proximity and what do they call it, the access journalism that still is kind of only a legacy media kind of thing.
That's always been my point, is that as the internet took over as the main provider of news, or at least the main conduit to news, the underpinnings of all that were still aggregated content from big news sources like your
Right.
CNNs, your all that stuff comes from somebody who's invested and put time and money towards training and qualified reporters. Like you said, when there's a volcano goes off in Iceland and the world's planes are grounded, you don't send them on Juno.
Yeah.
You, you send an international reporter from CNN or MSNBC or God forbid Fox News, who used to, at least during the daytime, do actual news. I'm not sure if they do anymore. I haven't watched in years, but
Right. How do you think, how have you watched the newspaper industry kind of contract, throughout your career? Because you were kind of right at the tail end of newspapers, kind of still dominating everything. And obviously, in the early odds, I remember, it used to be less prestigious for a journalist to have their articles write for the web edition or the web version, or but now it's completely the opposite, where if you're not on the internet doing things, it's no one will see anything that you do.
I sort of was there for that whole changeover. When I first came out of college in 1998, I mean, the internet was a thing. Wasn't much of a thing, but it was around. Nobody really knew how to deal with it or reckon with it. Uh, I had one colleague at a cartoonist convention tell me he didn't think it was going to last. He thought it was like the new CB radio, and that was
Right.
that time at age like milk.
Yeah, it wasn't prescient.
you know, but when I first started the newspaper, God, it was so much fun. You had these giant newsrooms, well funded, turning out incredible journalism on a daily basis,
Right.
really talented people. Um, you had they have the resources to have, reporters in every council meeting and, legislative session, and that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Now we depend on, citizen journalists or, people who are willing to do it, on spec or, it's contracted so much that you don't get a lot of that super valuable local, hyper local coverage that you got when I was there. You'd have like these big newsrooms full of like really interesting characters, and a newsroom is, especially the newsroom I went to at the Star Ledger. That was a paper you went to not really to start your career. It's where you landed in your mid career and stayed forever. So walking in that big football field size newsroom, I was easily the youngest guy by like a decade. We had a lot of all the younger reporters were out in sort of like the satellite offices out in like in Morristown or Trenton or stuff like that. They were all before you came to like the mothership. You would get seasoned out there. It was as those people started to come in as I had like people I could talk to who were my age. But, I was the youngest guy in the editorial board by 30 years or so, 25, 30 years.
Yeah, right.
And that I think
changing industry,
Yeah, and then just the bottom fell out. Once like the advertising and the classifieds and all that stuff went away, and it was painful. It was painful to around like 2006, 2007 is when it really started to go downhill. And then you go through like all your friends are leaving because there's buyouts and this and that, and eventually I just it got too hard, and I took my buyout in 2010. And sort of been free agent since. I still work for them. I still do stuff, produce content for them on a weekly basis. But it's when I think about what it was and what it offered in terms of journalism is also a public service,
right?
And that has been so diminished. It's not gone yet, but it's diminished. That's a bummer. I think we lost a lot, in terms of just accountability and stuff like that.
Right. And we definitely miss out at the local level and kind of the state level, because obviously national news will always be like big and buzzworthy and get attention and be like broadcast everywhere. But we definitely are missing out that so many like smaller newspapers and like TV stations, for instance, have been bought out by corporate kind of monolithic companies that maybe don't actually care about any of those communities and are basically just milking out what like remaining dollars they can squeeze out of
it's like
companies.
It's hedge fund backed, and they're gonna sell off whatever they can and run up the debt and take off the license plates and walk away from it.
Right. Did you throughout your career, have you ever had any controversial cartoons or any do you ever have a scandal or crisis or anything like that from anything that you've done?
Scandalous, maybe. I haven't had any scandalous stuff. You get when I go see when I go speak like college classes and stuff like journalism classes, I bring like my big file full of email.
Email, yeah.
Yeah. Now it's all digital, but back in the day, I used to have the most unique. I had a guy who would cut out my cartoons, write the most vile things on them in like magic marker, and then just mail them back to me.
That's nice.
And I would get, being syndicated, I would get really terrible mail from all corners of the country. Some really interesting stuff from Texas. People I love the idea that somebody was so incensed that they were compelled to go to their drug drawer, fish out the scissors, write something and then find a stamp.
Right. No, I've always thought about that. Like, you get like maybe it's just different, but like you hear a lot about like actors and stuff, and like, oh, never read the comments. You'll always regret reading the comments, like on your videos or posts or like reviews and things like that. But I love negative comments, especially because like the things I write are like so politically oriented and such of a mindset. But like, there's nothing that gives me more joy when someone that is like just irate and belligerent writes a 500 word comment that's just filled with insults, not well proofread or whatever. But it just cracks me up. And it's like, I love just not responding to some hate mail or whatever like that. And I don't really get a whole lot. But now that I'm getting bigger and bigger, I'm starting to notice more of the same people that, just write bullshit on every post that I ever do and stuff. But to me, it just amuses me. And it's like the cost of doing business, But I never understood how people can read the comments and take it so personally. I find it amusing.
Yeah, I do too. And I should also offer that 90% of my comments and mail or direct messages are very positive. It's that's always the spoonful of sugar part of it. But I don't spend a whole lot of time reading and flipping through the comments. When I was just posting to Instagram pre-Substack, get a lot of really nasty hateful stuff. And I used to go through and delete it because I don't want that on my page and people, reading that. But now I just sort of let it is what it is. Go ahead. If you want to be out in public being a hateful bigot, we'll see how that ages for you.
Yeah.
How that goes 5 years from now.
It's funny too, because it's self-defeating, because the people who just constantly shit on your stuff, algorithmically, that just makes it more attractive.
You're just going to see more of it.
Yeah, you're helping my stuff get shown to more people by writing, comments attacking me.
Yeah, but you cut down here and calling me a libtard. You're just opening the spigot.
Yeah.
Get ready. You're going to be socialist in a month.
Yeah. I love, because the halfway post, I get a lot of comments of you should call yourself the half-wit post. And that's a pretty good comment.
What I like most is how excited that person must have been when they thought of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And just the excitement, the typing, half-wit.
Right. And it's you're not the first. You definitely won't be the last person running that joke. You had a theory that you wrote on one of your editorials talking about how Republicans kind of created a right-wing media system so divorced from reality that now we're basically stuck with news. It's not only news, or it's news and news name only. But that kind of goes. I had a long theory of the case that I think a lot of our political chaos has kind of come down to the fact that George W. Bush was a bad president and did a lot of ineffective bad things. And then Republicans, and through the Patriot American lapel flag days, Republicans were just not capable of acknowledging that the Iraq War was a mistake. And a lot of the everything that they were doing with getting rid of, trying to privatize Social Security. It was just such a disaster of a presidency, followed by Obama, who Republicans tried so hard to turn into a terrible president and a jihadist Muslim terrorist bent on destroying America from within. And my theory of the case is just that something snapped in their brains from just pretending George W. Bush was making us safe and helping us and effective versus following up with Obama actually doing good things that were popular despite all of their rhetoric. And from that, just it was Earth 2 split off from Earth 1. And now they're just living in a different reality where you through the Tea Party days and then through Trump, now it's just Earth 2 doesn't even really seem to be that close to reality at all anymore. But yeah, I really like that comment that you had, just because it's my theory of the case too. Just that something in their brain snapped and they're no longer living in the same reality.
Well, I think they had it's what establishment Republicans that are still left. You see them your Lindsey Grahams and guys like that. You see them trying to adapt to the new reality because without that new reality, they'd be out of power. It was my theory of the cases that 15 years ago, the right wing or the conservative wing saw a demographic reality of a diversifying country, and they were facing some really harsh numbers going forward. And in order to stay relevant, in order to sort of keep their hand on the tiller, they ceded control of their party to sort of the farthest, to the loony bin. It started with the Tea Party and the weirdos who were taping the tea bags to tricorner hats, and then you get a perfect storm when you get a guy like Trump who comes along who lacks any sort of shame or ability to. He doesn't give a rat's ass about any institutions or norms. He just can't, like I said, he's got no ideology. He's got an operating system. His operating system is that he's greedy, self-aggrandizing, he's a racist, and he's a misogynist. Those are your four big ones. And everything sort of spins off from that. That's how he operates. He's transactional, completely transactional. If he'll let you pick the Supreme Court justices if he gets to be president. Yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't. He spends zero. They give him a list, and he just points and says that guy, and come at this time. So Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah,
they're all pre-vetted. So yes, that sort of the backlash, the Bush backlash after like he had such a disastrous presidency and that disastrous war. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit for how terrible he was. Now he's like the old guy who paints dogs and gives people butterscotch, but
right.
He was terrible. I mean, Dick Cheney ended his life as like part of the resistance. Somehow that happened. But people,
Republicans have kind of always been like that. Like you look at like Barry Goldwater's campaign and how like everyone thought he was like literally that was like when the clinical psychologists stopped getting involved in politics because they were all coming out saying Barry Goldwater's like literally insane. But by the 1980s, Barry Goldwater thought Reagan was like a lunatic, and like Barry Goldwater was like one of the elder statesmen that that went to Nixon and told him, "Sorry, you don't got the votes, you got to resign." And then like by like I said, Reagan's time, Barry Goldwater, like the party had moved way to the right of Barry Goldwater even. Right. And now you look at like Trump and everything that they're doing now, and you can't imagine that Ronald Reagan would have many positive things to say about Trump with like all the tariffs, anti-free trade stuff, just like shameless.
Just his relationship with Russia.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Reagan's idea to build like a giant satellite, a Star Wars defense system to defend ourselves from the Russians. The guys who he's over in Geneva right now, trying to like carve off giant chunks of Crimea.
And it's like I guess technically there's not proof that Russia is straight up like colluding with Trump for everything that he does. But like, especially with foreign policy, it's just like nothing Trump does seems to make sense except that like Russia has blackmail on him, is like dangling a Trump Tower in Moscow over his head or something like that.
Right. I think that's the thing, like collusion. There's plenty of evidence of collusion, but collusion is not a legal term. It's not a crime. You have to it has to be conspiracies, and it has to be like a formal conspiracy. There's plenty of collusion. That's just like you just see it. But it's a matter of does it meet the legal and I mean we all know what's happening, and that's one thing Trump is. He's been around for a long time. He's good at plausible deniability, and he's good at least early on, he was at seeming harmless. The fact that he was a punchline before he was president, I think, helped him immeasurably, because people never thought he was all that serious. I mean, really, as a human being, he's not. Like I said, though, he is a vessel for those who do want to do really gross stuff, and he'll let him because he doesn't care.
Yeah, of course. You had a recent cartoon about Dick Cheney. Rest in peace, wherever you are, Dick. You had him in a grouping with the Alien movie, Alien, Voldemort, Pennywise, and Thanos. What do you think long-term Dick Cheney's legacy will be?
Well, listen, he spent the last couple of years of his life, sort of being the good Republican, sort of speaking out. And like we mentioned earlier about just his actions surrounding the Iraq War are enough it might be hot where he is.
Yeah.
I mean, people forget also about the justification of torture and stuff like that.
Yep.
I did a ton of cartoons about that when that was happening. But in terms of his legacy, where he ends up 15 years from now, I think that he'll be seen mostly as like a mainstream Republican who it's going to be hard to overcome that Iraq War, and which is still the after effects, which I'm not sure how long that's going to take to,
Right. There was some news that the Bush family is going to, post Trump, try to take back control of the party, like George W. Bush, and I don't know, maybe Jeb Bush will run again. Who knows? But what do you think? There's any there? Do you think that the Bush family has any cred really with this? Like, certainly not the MAGA movement, but do you think there's any hope for the Republican Party to have like the normies kind of take back control? Because you look at Trump, he won like a plurality of the vote, and he really only won the primary because so many people refused to like quit the race, and they all thought it's going to be me and Trump, and then I'll beat him. But then, you had Marco Rubio, Jeb, like too many people stayed in too long, and Trump squeezed out a plurality win. But do you think there's a chance that a normie wing of the Republican Party might kind of squeeze out some kind of like plurality win in the 2028 primary?
perhaps. I think that it's been my opinion that what is currently going on with that party is unique to Trump, and that all of this doesn't necessarily work without him. It certainly doesn't work with JD Vance. It doesn't work with Ron DeSantis. It needs somebody with the sort of smarmy, gross charisma.
Yeah, isn't that funny about Trump that like
Trump has.
everybody else saying the exact same things as him, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't be effective. They'd come across as like just like I guess when Ron DeSantis tries to do it, he just comes across as a totally unlikable jerk.
Right, because Ron DeSantis is
real spicy.
There was somebody wrote a piece right before, like when Ron DeSantis was announcing his run, that he was trying to be like the mainstream smart Trump, and that it wouldn't work because he's a deeply odd little man.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be the case, and people sort of saw it. Trump has this weird thing, like I said, this repugnant charisma that either instantly repels, or you're like, well, I got to see how this turns out. I want to watch.
Yeah, right.
And as it turns out, really appeals to about 37% of the electorate, and they'll do whatever he says. But I don't think that I think this is why they're working so hard to sort of dismantle the underpinnings of the institutions and the norms, is because they know that without Trump, this is not sustainable.
Yeah.
You need that sort of that cult of personality figurehead to be that guy that can get people to the polls. Because it's not, like I said, it's not J.D. Vance, it's not Marco Rubio, it's not Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
It's not any of those guys. They don't have the same thing.
Right.
That that smarmy, he thinks like I think, he tells it like it is thing. They seem more like operators. I think the fact that that people can see that he's kind of a dummy helps, because they think it's more genuine. They don't think he's trying to get run over on them. They think he's sort of just, he says what he thinks what he says.
Yeah, right.
But he'll change his opinion in a second if you kiss his ass. Like I said, he's completely trails after. These other guys are different. They're politicians. I mean, I think the fact that Trump is not.
Yeah, they have some logical or ideological consistency of which Trump just doesn't.
There's a goal. They have a goal from. They have like an end point, an end goal. Trump is just he's completely. If you were a Buddhist, he'd be like enlightened. He's in the moment. He was 100% mindful.
Yeah.
What is working for me this second, this instant, right now?
Yeah, what gets me through this interview question or this day and the current events?
Hey, this Mondani guy is being really nice to me, and he's this is going to be a great issue
because he likes Mamdani. Yeah.
Right. He was telling 6 weeks ago, Mondani was the fall of America. The American experiment was over. We're all going to be socialists. Collectivize the farms. It's coming. We're all going to die of like the potato famine or some shit. Yeah. And now, he shows up to kiss it. He shows up to get a photo op. He's staring at this guy and just making goo-goo eyes at him. It was kind of uncomfortable. But, I did a post about it that went out today, about how J.D. Vance and like his, Eric and Don Jr. must feel watching this guy waltz into the Oval Office and get all the fatherly affection that they've been trying to.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty funny. Yeah. Certainly his kids don't get that any affection. I'm looking forward though to the primary for 2028, and I think obviously presidential. Talking about like sample sizes, like we are talking about earlier, you get like these elections that are every 4 years, so it's like really hard to actually gauge like where the country is. But obviously, 2026 will be a good case study because I think in 2026, especially with these congressional elections, you're going to have a lot of Republicans have to struggle with: do they distance themselves from Trump's unpopularity? With the ICE raids going off the rails, the Epstein file cover up being like really bad, Trump just obviously getting more demented. So like, I think in 2028, like I can't imagine Trump giving anyone an early endorsement. Like unless someone's like just clear away the front runner, because Trump, has to be the kingmaker. So like retroactively, he'll give someone an endorsement way late and then act like it was all thanks to him. But like, I don't think he's going to endorse JD Vance because JD Vance isn't that popular. It's hard to imagine Trump endorsing anybody because he'd have to then cede attention to, I guess the heir to the MAGA movement or the next follow-up Republican candidate. And I don't imagine Trump ever relinquishing the kind of vice grip he has like on the balls of the media, which is, always keeping the attention on himself.
Right. It's he owns the news cycle, and that's sort of how he runs. How he maintains his little cult though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're correct. I don't think he's going to endorse anyone. I think there's going to be between now and 2028. There's going to be some sort of fuckery involving trying to like finagle some sort of third term. There'll be some sort of constitution. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll work. Or at least right now I don't, because I think he's not nearly popular enough for something like that to happen. But all his attempts at kingmaking have not gone particularly well.
Yeah. It's worse because he just picks the person that I guess is maybe bribing him or is just the most like just unhinged person like himself. So then like Republicans have had this problem for like the last 20 years where the person who wins the primary is just like utterly unacceptable to the general electorate.
Right. Well, that's the problem with Governor Trump, is that you end up with him as kingmaker. He picks the candidates, and the guys who can win a primary are generally not guys who can win, or girls who can win, or ladies who can win a statewide election.
Right.
Jack Ciattarelli here in New Jersey, and when we ran last time, we ran as sort of like he was a soft anti-Trump Republican. He was an establishment guy. He had criticized Trump, not harshly, but enough. And he won. He came within 3 points. This time he went for MAGA and got dusted by 14.
Right.
So I keep wondering at what point are these guys going to realize that it's diminishing returns on going all in on this stuff, especially in states like New Jersey, where where a reasonable Republican candidate used to have Chris Christie was not that long ago. He didn't.
Right.
It didn't go well for him his second term. He left. He was left with like a 13% approval rating.
Right.
But he got reelected twice, and he was here for a long time. And Christie Whitman was here. We cycle through, according to like the way our voting patterns. This should have been a Republican victory, and that's what a lot of people were banking on with Ciattarelli, is that they thought he would be reasonable enough that people would vote for him. But the stink of Trump was too much. He couldn't overcome it, especially not here, where like I said, we're pretty familiar with the guy and his family, and the way he.
Do you think? I was going to say you had a cartoon. You had a cartoon recently about pretty harshly against the Democratic cave-in, which, like at the time I was like pretty bummed out about them giving up the government shutdown when it seemed like all opinion polls were going against Trump and Republicans. But would you say you've amended that at all in the last like 2 weeks now that with the Epstein files being, like a much bigger issue? And now like, we're going to have another shutdown in January. So they really just kicked the can down the road like 2 months while kind of like banking a couple spending things like keeping SNAP going and some things that like, I guess not to ask too many questions at once, but I do, it's interesting where Democrats are kind of the party that like keep letting Republicans take the country hostage because Republicans are willing to shoot the hostage. They want the government to shut down. They want the government to default on our debt. They want the government to just fire like a third to two-thirds of all government employees. So like, are you sympathetic to Democrats at all? Have you amended your idea on that shutdown? Was it maybe better tactics than it seemed at the time?
My opinion on that hasn't changed a whole lot. And it wasn't specific to sort of this episode, this shutdown. My issue with the Democrats and like the 80-year-old men who are primarily running, I mean, the gerontocracy. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is in there, but Hakeem Jeffries talks like he's an AI.
Yeah.
But you've got my problem with them has always been with like the leadership and the inability to press an advantage.
Right.
Chuck Schumer is great at retail politics. His natural habitat is to be out in front of a Chevron station, pointing at the sign, saying, "Look at how the gas prices have gone down." He loves that shit. It's not the way the stakes are bigger now, and you're sort of I'm drawn sort of more to the people who realize that, and I want to play by that set of rules rather than the old set of rules. Nancy Pelosi was hugely effective as as Democratic leadership.
Yeah,
she realized that the game has changed, and it's time to step back. You've got guys like Mondami and Ocasio-Cortez and Jasmine Crockett, and people who sort of have a better idea of what the stakes are now and can speak better to the electorate that because there's the problem with the Democratic Party is that it's such a wide and broad coalition. You have so many different factions that you have to keep in balance, and it's hard to balance all those. You have the activist class, and you have environmentalists, and all sort of these disparate factions that you have to keep under one tent. Republicans is a lot easier. They're more single-minded. It's a smaller group, but you can get them to act as one easier. And I think if the Democrats are going to move forward and really take advantage of, because Trump offers some advantages to it, he's tremendously unpopular right now. You have chances electorally to benefit from that. If they're going to press that advantage, they're going to have to change the way they operate. And it has nothing particularly to do with this specific shutdown, which I thought they handled pretty well until they didn't. But it has to do with the mindset of how you're going to deal with this guy. I mean, the only guy who's been there for a long time who seems to know really what to have like a real good firm grip on what happened is Bernie, who's still, in his 80s, still seems to be.
Yeah.
He at least realizes what's happening. It's not. I understand it's a lot easier to stay in the bubble and to make the fundraising calls and to do the stuff you used to do, but that's not what's at stake now. This is a lot bigger. It's existential in a way.
Yeah, certainly for the democracy. Yeah, for our democratic norms and institutions.
And it would be nice if the leadership did more than pay service to that. They'll acknowledge it every once in a while in speeches and stuff, but it doesn't play out in how they legislate or attempt to legislate or just navigate the minefield of Trump's Washington. So that was always my problem with it. It was not any specific things about this one episode. It was about how they operate in general and how they're terrible at messaging and they're bad at not all of them. Like I said, you've got guys like Pete Buttigieg and AOC who do a really good job getting out there and talking to people and sort of but then you've got, like I said, like Hakeem Jeffries doesn't sound like a person.
Yeah. He does that Democratic thing where like everything he says seems to be like so poll tested and so like adverse to risk of any kind. And like, that's, like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris both clearly would have been better than Donald Trump. They had all these plans, they had all these things, but they just came across as so inauthentic, which it's just sad that, like, seemingly very winnable elections, but the idea that they like just worried so much, and like, this is kind of bogus and BS about American politics anyway, but like the idea in 2024 that like we voted for with George W. Bush, it was like, which one would you rather have a beer with? In 2024, it was like, which one would you rather listen to for 3 hours on Joe Rogan? And like Kamala Harris just like kind of could not go on go on Joe Rogan's podcast and be a normal person for 3 hours. And Hillary Clinton kind of wasn't good at that either. And it just sucks. It's part of like knowing the media environment that we're in this era, this digital era. But it is, Democrats really do need better candidates that, Trump kind of teaches us that the only thing that really matters right now is attention. If you can't get attention, there's nothing going on.
And you have to know where to get that attention. I mean, the Republicans have a robust digital advertising and digital plan, program. Zoran Mandani was everywhere online. Ocasio-Cortez is everywhere online. It's not, advertising on linear television anymore is not going to get it done. You got to be where the eyeballs are. Mikey Sherrill here went very hard on online advertising and stuff like that. She went where the eyeballs are. And that, I think, at least has started to seep into Democrats, is that you can't just put up ads on your local television. I mean, they still do, but
right,
you got to be other places, man. You got to be where, especially if you want anybody under the age of 30 to vote, you got to be where they're not watching what you're advertising on. You got to be on YouTube. You got to be on wherever, where the eyeballs are. Instagram, what have you.
I get pissed off when I when I'm at hotels and I see the TV on with like the local news channel, and you see just like it's just nonstop ads, the TV ads, and I have to imagine that's like gotta be almost like a waste of money at this point. Like especially as like less and less people are watching that media. Probably the older people that are watching like local news.
I think that's who it's for.
Yeah. And it's like, we should be spending $1 billion on young people just making TikTok videos as much as they can, I feel like. And it's just like, it's like the one size fits all, just like carpet bombing, like, terrestrial TV access on local channels. It's like the equivalent of just you're competing against like medicine commercials. And to me, it just seems like very diminishing returns when you're spending so much money at election time prices for these local media markets. When personally, I don't watch almost any commercials ever. I don't pay attention to any of them. If I'm watching TV, it's not live. It's not anything where I'll see any of those commercials. And now I'm like, I'm 34 now. So I'm like, approaching kind of, almost middle age. And like that.
I'm 50. Fuck you.
Doesn't speak What's that?
I'm 50. Fuck you.
Right.
Yeah, I think you need to be all of those places because you need to reach different people. Like we just went through the election cycle here. We had local elections. I'm in the New York media market, so we had the New Jersey governor's race and the New York mayor's race. So in the evenings when I'm sitting there watching Jeopardy with my wife, which is probably the only linear TV I watch with any regularity, it's every commercial break is back to back. Jack Chirero, Mikey Sherrill, Zoran Mandani, Andrew Cuomo. Ad for dick pills. It's that's the demographic they're trying to reach. I think Democrats have done a better job in the last few election cycles getting where the eyeballs are and trying at least somewhat to get younger, because that's the big untapped market. It's getting real apathetic young voters who think nothing ever changes. Right. Well, yeah, shit changes. It's changing now, and if you don't like it, you got to come out and give us a hand, man.
Yeah. Now, the last section I have here, before I let you go, I was curious about the kids' books. You wrote 3 kids' books, and you wrote one about a hungry bear, a bird getting ready to leave the nest, and some dinosaur facts. What draws you?
My first kids' book was Nope. That was the bird one. That one's nearly a wordless sort of picture book about a bird afraid to leave the nest. Then I did Don't Eat That, which is the bear one. And then I did a series of 3 non fiction books. One was Dinosaurs Allowed Extinct. That's the one you mentioned. That's about the evolution of uh, dinosaurs to birds, modern day birds. Then there was the Goldilocks Zone, which is about our solar system, and it's basically how every planet but Earth will kill you, but for kids.
Yeah. Nice.
And the third one was called The Deep End, which is about the unexplored ocean, like the deep unexplored ocean. And yeah, that's sort of the children's books are just sort of I've always been interested in doing them because, like I said, I grew up with Mad Magazine and graphic, comics and stuff like that, and you do a black and white cartoon for 20 years, and then that goes color, and then I love it's a purist form of illustration that I really really enjoy working in. Um, and I've been collecting children's books since before my kid was born, and always thought that it would be fun to do them. And so about 10 years ago, I started.
Kid, kind of like getting that immediate like audience reaction.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, yes. She and my wife always were the first ones to see them. She was already a little bit too old for like to be. She was not a baby when I was started writing. She was already in high school and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's an animation student now. She's in college. So she quit. So she was always been into the storytelling and the lore and it's been really a joy to sort of work when you're doing what you and I do on a daily basis, which is traffic and wallow in sort of and analyze
doom scrolling,
right? So and comment on the worst people society has to offer. And when you go and you do children's books and you go and you do like a reading at a bookstore, and it's just 3 and 4 year olds, and they're happy to see you, and they like the drawing of the bird. And it's just hot.
Thanks, face.
It's delightful.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of events with that? Do you sell them a lot? Do they?
I mean, they've all been
sales.
They've all been published through major publishers. The first two were with Penguin Random House, Viking, and the last 3 have been with HarperCollins. So they handle the marketing. I mean, you can get them at any bookstore. You can get them at Barnes and Noble and all that stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
So I don't really have to.
I'm starting to get into with some of my books. I'm trying to work on getting an agent, and then maybe get some distribution deals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have any questions? Go ahead and
might do them sometime.
Yeah, it's highly competitive, but I mean, if you clearly have an audience and something you can something you can bank on. So I mean, that'll help you. I really enjoy. It's divorced from the politics. It's a purely creative endeavor. If I think of an idea, I can work it up and I can present it to my agent, and either he likes it or he doesn't. And if he does, we send it out. And if not, I move to the next one. I did like the 3 nonfiction ones, which were super fun and required a lot of research. Which was also, I enjoy getting deep into into the weeds of that stuff. And so, the next projects I'm dealing with might be, I always have picture book projects I'm working on, and the next couple, I've got like a couple of graphic novel ideas that might be a lot longer. Yeah, so like actually longer form comics, some nonfiction ones and some fiction stuff too.
Anything you want to shamelessly plug before we go? Anything you want to highlight? Definitely follow Drew on Substack if you don't already.
Come on over to the Substack if you want. Happy to have you. Free, paid, however you want to do it. There'll always be I always have like a free tier. I don't put much anything behind the paywall. If you like it and you support me, you'll pitch in. But
that's kind of where I'm at. I struggles. Like I was looking yesterday, I was like, I haven't put anything behind the paywall in like 8 days or something.
Yeah, I haven't done it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, the professional side of me is like, maybe I should do that a little bit more, but I don't
Sure.
know. I'm also a comedian trying to make people laugh, and I want my jokes out there so people
Yeah,
read it. And it's the end of the
we're not here because we're good at business.
yeah, right, yeah, right, for sure.
I'm not available to talk to you for an hour and a half on a Tuesday afternoon
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
because
Right,
I'm super high powered and business minded.
right,
Um,
exactly.
Now, just, if you want to buy a book, they're on Amazon. They're at your local bookseller. Uh, it is Christmas season, so uh,
Yeah, there you go. Good plug there.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Batty, just join me on the Substack. Find me wherever, Google me. I'm online. A bunch of different comics places and stuff like that. Uh, I appreciate the looks and the reads, and I appreciate talking to you.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Thanks for coming on Brain Milk Podcast, Drew. It was good to talk to you, and we'll do it again sometime, I'm sure.
Great. I'll talk to you later.
All right, man.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one. Thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll catch you on another Brain Milk in the future.